Hi, Ms. Bransma. This is my final video for grade 12 peer tutoring with Ms. Cho's grade 9 science class. So, to start things off, supporting students has not always been easy because within the class, some students stand out as needing more support than others. And I found a lot of these students struggled from a lack of motivation, and that stemmed from a lack of interest. So, for one example, there is a student in the classroom who at the start of the semester was really disengaged from all class and really did not pay attention during like learning notes, and then also didn't show effort when handout packets were given and work was expected to be done. And in the start of the semester, I approached this by just re-explaining things and hoping that maybe me re-explaining he might listen one of these times. But the truth is that if a student can zone out one time, they can zone out again and again. It's not an issue for them. So by the end of the semester, I found that by engaging the student, by connecting the subject that we were learning in the class with a subject that they already have an interest in, the student was much more capable of showing interest and actually processing the information that I was trying to tell them, right? So an example of this was in the physics unit when we were learning about like Ohm's law. An example was that we were talking about his house and how he finds that in some rooms light switches will activate lights and then other light switches will deactivate the same lights, and how I was explaining how those circuits work within his house. So obviously he was more engaged because it's no longer just some conceptual idea, but it's actually a real thing that he can see in the real world. Now, by the end of the semester, he was much more engaged, I found. So some growth that I found was obviously that student showed a lot of growth, but also with everyone in general, there was a lot of growth within the subject of staying engaged. And a lot of that was because of the use of devices has really distracted the class at the start of the semester. I found that a lot of students were constantly on their devices, whether they needed to or not. Most of the time they didn't need to. And so one student in particular would never get any of the worksheets done. And so honestly, the best way to approach that one was just constant reminders. And although we didn't use the phone hotel much in the classroom, just reminding them to put their phone down when I saw them, because I was always circulating and I always saw, they're picking up their phone again to go on Snapchat or whatever it might be. Just continuous reminders really helped that one student get off their phone, and by the end of the semester they were much better at gauging themselves and doing that on their own. They didn't need me to remind them. They knew they weren't supposed to be on their phone, and so they were a lot more engaged, and that was a good growth. And that happened for many students, but I'm thinking of one in particular. So some highlights of my peer tutoring experience, I'd say that the biggest highlight for me was really seeing the difference, seeing the relationship between like my grade 9 year and their grade 9 year. I see a lot of their traits in myself of that time, and then I also see, it's really interesting to me, the difference between how I remember myself from grade 9 and then how I see myself now, and also how I perceive them now, right? There's a lot of differences between myself and my old self, and I feel there's a lot of differences between my old self and their current selves, who are, grade 9 versus grade 9, same grade, but different people. And I think that's a generational thing. Even though we're very close in years, we're only 3 or so years apart, there is a lot of difference between the way we were raised, partially because of pandemics and, technology, but it's just interesting to see the differences between us. My personal experiences as a leader and tutor have really improved. I feel like at the start of the semester, I thought I knew more than I did. Although I knew I didn't know everything, I thought that my experience as a coach would tie in a lot more than it did to peer tutoring. But I realize now, absorbing like knowledge about physical activity such as swimming is much different than absorbing knowledge about an academic such as learning the basics of biology and all the words that are needed to be remembered. They are both memorizing things and putting things into muscle memory, but different ideas, different concepts, and it's a lot more difficult for students to put things that they can't always envision into their head, like envisioning a cell when you can't always see each little piece and bit, right? So it was a very different experience, and I think I grew a lot in that area of actually learning how to educate students with something that I wasn't always the most knowledgeable about. I think in my future, all of the skills that I've taken in throughout this course will be very beneficial, because I feel like my need to, teach people and to engage with people of different generations and different ages will never subside. I feel like I'm always going to have to do that for the rest of my life, whether that's in coaching or in my current job or post-secondary or even a career in the future, right? I feel like especially the piece of connecting with people of different generations or different cultures, that is something that it's going to happen all the time, especially as a business major. It's just always going to happen, and that's something that I'm going to carry on forever. I like to continue to, or I feel like my biggest strength was my flexibility, my ability to change and educate in different ways, and I'd like to continue to develop my way of being more concise with my explanations. And finally, in my reflection, for responsibility and attendance, I gave myself a 7 out of 8, because I found, for the most part, I was very proactive and warned Miss Cho of my absences much in advance, but at times I forgot to do so. For initiation and work ethic, I feel like I was really hardworking, and I think that ties into my peer tutoring skills. I feel like there's always space to grow, but as long as I work hard and I show my work ethic, I think my peer tutoring skills will continue to grow.